Adil Catalino, Bachurimin Kasarungut, Basangat Kajubata. Arus, Arus, Arus. My mother used to tell me stories before I slept. Stories of the Dayak tribe from Kalimantan. She told me about how they used to run through their streets in their battles with enchanted machetes with opposing tribes. She told me about the herbs and magical bark clothings they would use to become giant, bulletproof, or even invisible. I heard stories of Panglima Burung, Dayak men who commanded birds and were great and noble warriors. Now, for me, as a young boy born very far from Kalimantan, who had never even lived in Indonesia before, these people seemed alien. And yet, my mother assured me that as an Indonesian from Kalimantan, they were part of my heritage. I didn't believe her. I mean, after all, I had barely even seen Dayak people in real life, and I knew next to nothing about them other than what my mother had told me in stories. When I first came to Indonesia to go to Greenstone, I began to feel a tug towards the culture. I wanted to learn more about it and to experience it. A more spiritual Buddhian yogi would probably say it was a calling from my ancestor spirits, but I would just call it curiosity. You see, as I had started to open up to my musical side, I took more of an interest in exploring new, unique forms of music. I decided that for my Greenstone, I wanted to study the traditional instruments of Kalimantan. I wanted to try and change these instruments to fit better into the modern world. For example, using something other than fishing lines for strings would have been a good start. But through learning these instruments, I started to learn about the religion, the culture, and the stories. I met and made friends with many Dayak musicians and dancers. I lived with them, ate with them. I learned from their masters. I spearfished with Dayak youth in pristine forest rivers under starlight so bright you could read in the dead of night without a lamp. And yet, I still felt a divide. There was still a disconnect between them and me. As much as I have experienced with these people, they were still alien. No matter how much they tried to assure me that because of my mother's ancestry, I was one of them, their assurances fell on ears that refused to listen. To me, and to many other Orang Champuran in the audience, personal identity has always been a bit of a struggle. I've never fully identified as Australian, American, or Indonesian. And in this past year and a half of learning and studying Dayak music, I've become even more confused. Now you're not only telling me that I'm American, Australian, and Indonesian, but that I am Orang Dayak also? I felt insecurity in admitting this. There was little connection between the culture and myself. I mean, I didn't speak the dialects. My Indonesian is embarrassing. I didn't even own a machete. I could barely hunt frogs. How could someone so disconnected and westernized as myself be called Dayak? And yet, many of my friends and teachers simply disagreed and said, "You are from Kalimantan, you are Dayak." When I first started this project, I wanted to modernize and keep the Dayak music alive. And when I go back and I look at these plans, I kind of laugh at myself. You see, to change the strings from fishing lines, even though it might improve the tone, would remove a lot of what makes the instrument so special and unique. I failed to understand something so basic about culture, and music in particular. I'm reminded of the call of the kawaio'o bird, an extinct Hawaiian bird. It's the recording of an endling, or the last of its species. A male bird calling in a mating duet to a female who will never answer. What is the purpose of recording, of writing off as extinct, that which is still alive and can be helped to become much stronger than it began? That is what I have learned about the music of the Dayak. It is not dead or dying, but many people won't care until it's already a sad story of bygone cultures. When I was in Kalimantan attending a gathering of the tribes called the Irau, that one, I had the opportunity to play in a sape ensemble that broke world records. Around me were 1,000 musicians who had grown up as Dayak. They were not dead. They were not dying. They were not endlings or the last of their kind. They were strong and proud of their culture. That is why I thought I was so ignorant, because I had written off that which was so strong as sickly and weak simply because nobody talks about it on the internet. Culture is not just the sound of the music. It's not the language spoken or the clothes that are worn. It's more than that. It's the Dayak men today who practice the war dances, or the women who still practice the traditional weavery. It's the lifestyle, and the Dayak lifestyle is strong and evolving. We should not record to take these files and put them in a museum where people years from now can come and look and wonder what these people were like. We should record so that we can use modern technology to spread those recordings around the world. Unfortunately, some of the changes affecting the Dayak people now are affecting the passings of the cultural traditions. In the past, Dayak people have been branded as low and primitive. My mom used to tell me stories about how they would try to trade bags of rice for education, and they were forced to cut off their traditional stretched ears in order to attend school. Eventually, the Dayak youth leave their villages to go to cities to study in universities or find work. In those cities, they don't hear Dayak music, and when they speak their own language and abide by their own cultures, it's considered weird. My family history is the perfect example of that which is happening to many Dayak people now. My mom told me stories of the great stilt house in Tanjung Silor that my family used to own. She told me about how she used to run through the village with her cousins, stealing ripe mangoes from her grandmother's tree and narrowly escaping a beating. But when we left the village and left the stilt house behind, we became more disconnected from this lifestyle. Years later, our great stilt house has burned, and with it has burned much of our connection to Tanjung Silor and our family heritage. Yet, despite all of this disconnection, I've still fallen in love with the Dayak culture. A big reason because of this is because of their connection to nature. They are far more connected than us at the Green School even. They grow crops from the lands, fish from the waters, bathe in the rivers. They believe that all life flows down the river from the heart of Borneo. Their connection goes far deeper than anything that we have known here. I visited an ancient site there called Tanah Olen, or Forbidden Forest. It's a primary growth forest protected by the Dayak tribes in northern Kalimantan. And there I learned a deeper love for nature than before. I spent hours in clear rivers, skipping and stacking stones, trying to catch fish with my bare hands under the shades of great trees. I watched the birds fly from their lofty perches and heard the gentle, all-encompassing songs of insects. The forest was no longer just a number for carbon offset or species biodiversity. It was much more. A Dayak Manyan elder once said, "When our bodies die, it seems as if the soul is gone, but that is not the case. It is still there, vibrant and returned to the earth. Our flesh becomes the soil, our bones become the trees, our veins become the roots, our hair becomes the moss, our tears become the rivers, and our teeth turn to stones." That is our belief. She didn't see the forest as just a nice place to visit every once in a while. It's the heritage of all Dayaks. Her generation, her ancestors' spirits, and the generations to follow will all be benefited by the gifts left in the forest. I've learned so much with the Dayak, more than just about music or about nature. Living with them has made me learn about myself as well. The Dayak are a people who have a very strong sense of belonging, of clear belonging, knowing where they're from, that I have never known. I've never had a connection to my homeland or to my ancestry, just a place to truly call home before. And I admired so much about them, their strong community values, their connection to nature, the way that they welcomed me so readily, even though I felt I was clearly an outsider. And while my original plans may have been slightly misguided, I'm grateful that I followed along with them because the path that I've been taken on has been amazing, and I'm truly grateful. And while my family may have been disconnected from this part of our roots a long time ago, I want to reestablish the connection. That's why over the past year and a half, I've been learning 3 different Dayak traditional instruments from very different tribes, and I've been presenting and performing them all across the world. So the first instrument that I've learned is called sape, or sampe, or sapek, or sampek, or kachapi. Depending on wherever you're from, it's got a different name. I learned this with Pakphilius of the Dayak-Nya Omalung tribe. He was one of my main mentors throughout this project as well. The second instrument is called kachapi, which I played at the beginning. Oh, yeah, second instrument called kachapi. Played this in the beginning. I learned this with my friends Pak Benny and Pak Daniel Nuhan. It's a fretless lute played in central Kalimantan. Now, I would like to invite my mother to the stage. Which way does this go? Okay. Thanks. Taro, see. Uy. See?
song.